security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India, the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Hello and welcome to this special broadcast from the Tribune Network. The big story we're discussing today, a big diplomatic row has broken out late yesterday night. It all started when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made some sensational allegations claiming links of Indian intelligence agencies to the killing of Khalistani activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Following that, the Canadian Foreign Office announced that it was asking one of top Indian diplomat from Canada to leave the country. And in a tit for tat, the Indian government had also asked one of a top diplomat based in New Delhi to go back to Canada and leave within 5 days. We're discussing this big story. Joining me live, my senior colleagues from Delhi, Sandeep Dixit, who covers the Ministry of External Affairs, and Ajay Banerjee, my other senior colleague, who keeps an eye on the defense and intelligence agencies. To you first, Sandeep, did it come as a bolt from the blue, or was something brewing between the two sides which led to Prime Minister Trudeau making these sensational claims?
You said it actually. It was a bolt from the blue, but it was brewing for a long time. If you recall, Rohit, that the month before the last one, India had to post out 2 diplomats from Canada because the Khalistanis had splashed their names and photos on posters all over Canada, holding them responsible for Nijjar's death. So this had been brewing for a long time, and not just now. I'll tell you a very interesting statistic. In the last 2 months, in last 2 years, the High Commissioner to Canada has been summoned more often than the High Commissioner to Pakistan. So you know where the problem is now. And there have been demarches and summoning of the High Commissioner, protests lodged in Ottawa by our diplomats. It's been a continuous process for the last 4 or 5 years. And of course, as you know, that this is an issue that is not just 4 or 5 years, Balki it is an issue of 35 to 40 years, where undocumented people with crime that they had committed with blood on their hands, they were allowed to enter Canada and they were given shelter. And then today we have such obnoxious sights of a woman draped in a blood-drenched sari being taken on a float, all that kind of tasteless protests. So as long as the political protests, India is fine with it. There are a whole lot of political protests that go on against PM Modi. In fact, each time PM Modi goes to the US, there are many organizations that protest against this or that, Manipur, CA, NRC, this, that. So as long as this is a political fight, as long as it remains within the realm of dialogue and of campaigning, of listing out the wrongs or rights as one sees, that's fine. But when terror comes in, when guns come in, when drugs come in, when people are threatened with their lives, then it takes an altogether different turn. And let us not forget that Air India Kanishka bombing, in which 379 people were killed, 268 were Canadian citizens. And yet that probe was never done satisfactorily, and a lot of people were let off the hook. And that shoddy probe, that resulted in the situation that we are seeing today, where a handful of extremists in Canada are holding bilateral ties to ransom.
But Sandeep, what has perhaps come as something of a bolt for the blue, as I mentioned, that the significant thing being the Prime Minister, Canadian Prime Minister, going public with his allegations. As you rightly mentioned, they've been summoned, diplomats have been summoned, but perhaps for the first time, Prime Minister going public and coming up with a statement. What could have been the trigger?
The trigger, the immediate cause was, of course, the Prime Minister's meeting, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau at G20. And as you know, India had been cut up with Canada before that. So Prime Minister Modi had 15 bilateral meetings. Of them, 13 were structured meetings. One was a working lunch. One was a working dinner with US President Joe Biden. And with Trudeau, it was a diplomatically downgraded pull-aside meeting, where you just stand you just stand casually and you talk to each other. So it was a diplomatically downgraded meeting, and at that now we have come to know sparks had flown. Sparks had flown where PM Modi had clearly said that this kind of threat to diplomats, diplomatic premises, and in fact, Rohit, I'll tell you, it's an underreported incident. The High Commissioner of Canada was blocked from going for a public function, and he had to nearly flee for his safety. Now, this kind of stuff no country can tolerate. You tell me whether US will tolerate it, whether UK will tolerate it, anyone else will tolerate. So it was brewing for all time, but the flashpoint was, of course, the meeting between PM Modi and Trudeau. And for some unexplained reasons, PM Trudeau was unable to leave the country for 2 days. But he had made up his mind to really embarrass India. So he sent his national security advisor by a special flight to the UK to brief Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. And then he starts calling up Prime Minister Joe Biden and this and that. But if he had so much of concrete proof, then in Parliament he should not have given half a statement where he said there are indications, where he said that they are pointers. So it is not really a done thing. No arrests have been made. There's no smoking gun so far. Yet in Parliament, India's name has been dragged. So that is an unfortunate part.
And also strong reactions coming from the Indian side. The diplomat in a tit for tat, the diplomat has been asked to go back. Are we looking at the relationships between the two countries, plummeting further, more action being taken, or Indian side considering more such strong steps to send across a message to Canadian government?
Yes, there are two aspects to it. First, it is a very complex relationship in the sense a whole lot of Indians are migrating to Canada and are becoming Canadians themselves. The largest body of people immigrating to Canada are the Indians. So there's this the people-to-people contacts which diplomats like to speak about so highly, that the people-to-people contacts, so the relations between the two countries are going to be stronger. But that does not seem to be the case with Canada. As more and more people go to Canada, our relationship seems to be deteriorating more and more. And some of the roots are in domestic politics in Canada. This time, Mr. Trudeau's party did not get an absolute majority. And so he has had to depend on, let us say, a center-left party or a left party, National Democratic Party, which has certain views, certain very strong views on Khalistan and separatism. So Mr. Trudeau, maybe to save his government, has also taken some stands that he shouldn't have taken as a prime minister. In fact, if we recall that his predecessor, Stephen Harper, we had a very good relationship going with Stephen Harper, and a lot of things had been done. In 1974, Canada had imposed sanctions on India regarding nuclear technology and all. And during Stephen Harper's time, that was almost we had nearly solved all the bilateral irritants that were there, and we were poised to go on a better trajectory. But that unfortunately has become a victim to domestic politics in Canada, and not just victim to domestic politics, a handful of people in Canada who are now dictating how the separatist issue and the Khalistani issue should be tackled.
Let me bring in Ajay into the discussion. Ajay, the Indian intelligence senior diplomat from Canada being ousted out, the Canadian government alleging that there was a Indian connection to the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. What are the Indian intelligence agencies saying? Off the record, obviously, but what is the buzz in the intelligence corridor?
See, Rohit, I'll draw in from my experience of covering Punjab in the 90s into early 2000s, and then bring you on to what is happening now. First of all, addressing the issue of these expulsions of diplomats. It takes me back to the Cold War era when we used to have such expulsions of diplomats, but they usually used to be on spying, on grounds of spying. This is the first time India's name has been taken by a Western world or the developed world in terms of what has been claimed by President Prime Minister Trudeau of India having carried out such allegations usually originate from Pakistan and in India about Pakistan, vice versa. Now coming back to Nijjar specifically. Nijjar had a red corner Interpol notice against him since 2016, issued by the Punjab Police. The Unlawful Prevention Activities Act, UAPA, had declared him a terrorist 2 years ago. The National Investigating Agency, the NIA, had put a bounty of rupees 10 lakh on him. Nijjar had been doing anti-India protests outside various consulates, not just in Canada, in US, in Germany, and in UK also. along with another man, Sardar Singh Khanda of UK, who died a few months ago in UK of supposedly of cancer. Now, why is this happening? This is not a new phenomenon. In the days of terrorism in Punjab, a lot of people of both the religions migrated to Europe and also to Canada. Some of the fissures of those times of the 80s and 90s remain unresolved between Indian communities living in India and also living in Canada. Why are people like Nijjar flourishing? It is clearly now partly a kind of underlying tension which these people want to exploit about the 80s and the 90s, which I believe personally is unresolved. There is no closure to the cases of 80s and 90s. These people are driving their agendas on the cases which are unresolved of the 80s and 90s. That is driving these people to claim what is Khalistan in states like Canada or UK or in elsewhere in Europe. I'll also remind the listeners and viewers, a few years ago, Germany had arrested one of our persons, claiming that he is the agent of one of our external agencies, which the case went on and is still going on. Now, such cases have been happening in the Cold War era too, that diplomats got expelled. Ours, the white birds, the western birds, France, Polish diplomats. And keep in mind, during the Cold War, a Polish diplomat would not be technically Western world. Polish diplomat would be somewhere in between the Cold War countries. Now, why is this happening? Those are the unanswered questions which remain there, Rohit, so far.
And also, Ajay, this Nijjar, in fact, had traveled to Canada and made an undocumented entry to Canada. And in fact, as we mentioned, a lot of gangsters, especially from Punjab, they have been operating from Canada. Indian agencies have been sharing those dossiers with the Canadian government, but nothing much seems to have changed on the ground. Now, does it mean now India has reached a saturation point when it comes to dealing with this issue? They have been sending these dossiers to Canadian government, but nothing seems to have happened.
Rohit, very good that you raised this point. Gangsters in Canada is one of the red flags India has raised during the bilaterals between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Trudeau. As Sandeep said, there were informal meetings during the G20 summit on September 9th and 10th in New Delhi. There are gangsters which India has listed, told Canada, given names, given addresses. Some of these gangsters are also involved in one way or the other with the killing of Sidhu Moosewala, the singer who was killed in Punjab around a year and a half ago. Part of those gangs are lodged in jails in Delhi and in Punjab elsewhere. Some of these people are operating from abroad. These names with specific addresses are with the Canadian government. Why the Canadian government is not handing over these people to India is itself questionable. These people, most of these gangsters have gone abroad on fake and fictitious passports under pseudonyms. They have not gone under the original names also. The Canadian government knows it very well that these people can turn around to be threat to their Canadian nationals also. Why Canada is not handing over these gangsters is the mystery, Rohit.
One last question, Sandeep, to you. What next for the Indian government?
Yeah, what next? I'm sure the expelling of the station chief of Canadian intelligence is not the last word by the Indian government. And there is going to be a lot more. Because at the end of the day, if Canada uses these people, which Ajay mentioned, terrorists and gangsters as a tool of foreign policy or to promote their domestic politics, then in the end, it is going to hurt them. But it is going to hurt us badly also. Rohit, you, Ajay, all of us know how what period through which Punjab has come through. And now when it is beginning to stand on its feet, beginning to revive itself, we can hardly afford to have these kind of provocations happening from all over the place. And therefore, it is very surprising to us as Indians that Mr. Trudeau chose to take India's name in Parliament without touching on other aspects that are also troubling India. And there also in Parliament, he had a half-baked formulation at best. So one can say that there is more to it than meets the eye, and that the Indian government is not going to take a step back. I mean, no Indian government will take a step back when these kind of things happen.
Thank you so much. Now it remains to be seen how it pans out in a tit for tat. The diplomat, Indian government has also asked intelligence, the senior diplomat from Canada, to move out of India within 5 days. Now it remains to be seen how this pans out in the next few days. Thank you so much, Sandeep, and thank you, Ajay, for those latest details. Thank you so much. So that's all we have for you on this special broadcast. We'll keep on providing you all the latest updates on this huge diplomatic row. And also, you can log on to our website, tribuneindia.com, and also follow us on our other social media platforms like Facebook and also Instagram. Meanwhile, thanks for joining in.